So, given that, knowing that we're trying to manage for incremental outperformance, what did we do last year? What did we see? And when I stood here this time last year, I told you it was going to be a tumultuous year. It was going to be full of sound and fury. And so let's take a look at what we did. Every single conversation we had at the end of 2007 was, next year's going to be a down year. What are we going to do about it? I promise you, to a T. That's all we talked about. And so the first thing we decided to do was implement a defensive strategy by hedging 11.25% of our portfolio. Those of you not familiar, the way we run our equity portfolio is 45% to the growth style, 45% to the value style, 10% to special situations. We chose to locate the hedge in the growth side of the portfolio because, frankly, growth tends to be a little bit more volatile in big market swings. And so that was the right location for it. We chose for the hedge within the portfolio the IV Asset Strategies Fund. Here's why. Here are the returns of the IV Asset Strategies Fund versus the S&P 500 in rising markets between September 30th, 2002 and the end of 2007. And as you can see, in rising markets, this isn't the horse you want, right? But in falling markets, when the S&P was down 2%, this again is on a quarterly analysis, they were up 2%. They had a very good judgment, weren't afraid to use hedging techniques, certainly weren't afraid to use precious metals and go to gold. And so this caught our attention, and that became our hedge. Second defensive strategy. We said we want to make sure that all of the managers in the portfolio have proven downside track records. Well, part of the problem was we didn't have many down markets between 1980 and what we just went through. But the big one we had was in 2000 to 2002. And so here's a look at, and I'll magnify this, but here's a look at our team going into 2008. Collectively, in 2000, they outperformed the market by 20%. In 2001, collectively, they outperformed the market by 8%, and in 2002, they outperformed by 12%. So going into a down market, this is the team we wanted in the core of the portfolio. Our third defensive strategy was to use our special situations piece to adapt to changing market conditions. And in fact, we made a lot of trades down in that area of the portfolio. Now, it only represents 10%, but it's in the past offered great opportunity for the portfolio to outperform. And this, incidentally, is where we have the most direct control and the most direct connection to the markets. We don't go through a manager, we act as the manager. And so here's what was unforeseen. First of all, the massive amount of deleveraging. You might have heard the buzzword. Here's how it works. If I'm a hedge fund or I'm an investment bank and I have a promise to you that I can outperform the market every year and the market's rising, the way I do it is instead of owning 100% of the market, I borrow money and get up to, say, 170% of the market. So I can just amplify returns on the upside. Well, when those returns start to fade, the people who lent me that money, they kind of want it back. And when they want it back, I got to sell stuff. And I can't sell real estate, and I can't sell private equity, and I can't sell timberland. So the only thing I can sell is stocks, good old American international stocks, whatever the case may be. And on July 15th, it was like somebody rang a gong on Wall Street and said, call back all the chips that are out there in the hedge funds. And they just started dumping everything. And it was extremely disruptive within the marketplace. This is a chart of the US dollar going back to 2006 or so. And as you can see, we were kind of going through this orderly decline. And I know that freaked everybody out a little bit, but that was actually good for our economy. It was stimulating our exports, and it was helping us with global imbalances. Well, when the hedge fund started deleveraging, specifically July 15th through November 20th, this is what happened to the dollar. It went on a 20% surge, which is a very disruptive thing, especially if you're long gold, which was the natural hedge going into last year. And so what happened was when they started deleveraging, the dollar rallied, gold is the anti-dollar, and so gold started declining. Additionally, a lot of the hedge funds owned a bunch of the gold stocks, and so next thing you know, you've lost 60% in gold and silver. And unfortunately, that's what Ivy used to hedge. And so this is the return of the Ivy Asset Strategies Fund versus the S&P 500. You can see we looked bright right there. We had about a 10% spread across the index. That was very helpful. and then the hedgies started dumping everything. The dollar went straight up, gold broke, and it broke our hedge. That was unfortunate because we really liked that fund, but the moment it broke the hedge, it broke the investment case that we had made for owning the fund, and we had to sell it. The other thing that was unforeseen last year was the sheer amount of panic and terror that hit the marketplace. Now, if you'd have built a spreadsheet, which frequently I do, there was no way to incorporate into the spreadsheet the fact that the Feds would let Lehman Brothers fail, and that in their infinite wisdom, Washington would vote no on the TARP package the first time. And here's a sense of what those two things wrapped up together did to the market. Between January 1st and September 19th's high, the market fell 14%. That's within normal ranges. That was within our expectations. That's what we were prepared for. Well, between September 19th's high and October 10th's low, the market fell 34% in just 15 trading days. From that October 10th low and into December 31st, the market actually went up 7%. So basically, the entire year happened in 15 days. And during that period, frankly, our defense was just overruled. Here are those same managers with those returns that were so attractive during the last down market, and here's what happened to them. In the third quarter of 2008, collectively, they fell 14% against 8% for the S&P and underperformed the market by 6%. Coming into the fourth quarter, the markets rationalized really a little bit in December, and you could see their outperformance began again, but it was still a down 20% quarter for them. The third quarter was a completely irrational market. In fact, in the hedge fund world, they called it the quarter of quant flu. One of the things that occurred in that quarter that made all of these managers underperform was that the SEC banned short selling on bank stocks and financial services firms. Remember that? Well, what that meant was that those stocks all went up. Well, any of you who own bank stocks know you really didn't want to own those stocks. So the managers were right. You didn't want to own those stocks, but they were a big portion of the S&P 500, and when the SEC banned short selling, they went up. There was nothing you could do about it. Okay, so when we're in the middle of that downturn, and I'll never forget it, the question becomes, what should we do? Well, traditionally, history does not treat those who panic kindly. This was the lesson of 1987. Between October 5th's high and October 20th's low that year, the market fell, eerily, 34%, this time in just 11 days. Between that point and the end of the year, the market ended up 14%, and in the next 2 years it climbed 17% and then 32% in 1989. So if you'd have pushed the eject button down here, it would have been a lot of blue Mondays as the market accelerated, and then the question becomes, when do I get back in? You got to be right twice. That's hard to do. The other side of it is picking the day to sell was unbelievably difficult to do. There were 252 trading days in 2008. 134 of those days moved by 1% or more, 72 by 2% or more, and 18 days in 2008 moved by 5% or more. To give you some perspective, there were only 19 days in the previous 57 years that moved by 5% or more. You certainly didn't want to make the day the wrong day to hit the eject button.